You have always had a shadow. Even before you knew how to speak, before you could name what lived behind your eyes, something followed you, silent, patient, close. You saw it stretching beside you on sunlit days. You watched it dance on walls in candlelight. You may have played with it, feared it, even tried to outrun it, but you never truly asked what it was. And that was your first forgetting. We were not always so blind. There was a time before language wore crowns and temples, forgot how to whisper, when every tribe, every culture, every elder with cracked fingers and a bone-worn tongue knew of the shadow's truth. They gave it names the wind could carry. They fed it songs beneath eclipses. They warned their children, never lie with your shadow in the room. The ancients did not call it superstition. They called it survival. For your shadow is not just absence. It is not the trick of light and angle. It is not a shape. It is a presence. It listens. It records. It remembers every version of you that you tried to bury. In some of the oldest texts, those carved not in ink but in iron, bone, and obsidian, the shadow was revered as Avek'Tul, the breath that follows, the echo that lives, the twin beneath the veil. It was said that Avek'Tul is the first to arrive when you are born, and the last to leave when you die. And if you never come to know it, if you die with your back turned to the thing that followed you through every door and dream, then your story does not end. It fractures. This book, this forbidden scroll you now hold in thought, perhaps already too late, is not here to scare you. It is here to wake you. Because the greatest threat to your soul is not darkness. It is the part of you that remembers what you forgot and no longer trusts you. The doctrine of the shadow. You believe your shadow is cast by the sun, but the sun merely reveals what already follows. Fragment from the Veil Keeper's tablets. The ancients did not debate whether the shadow was real. They debated what it wanted. Every child born into the old paths was taught 3 things before they could walk. 1, you are not alone, even in solitude. 2, you are being watched even by yourself. 3, the thing watching you is not your enemy, but it is not yet your ally. The doctrine of Avek'Tul teaches that your shadow is not simply yours. It is a being of memory, hunger, and patience, attached to you not by light, but by the act of existence itself. It was not made when you first stood in sunlight. It was made when your soul first chose form, the triple nature of the shadow. Avek'Tul is described not as a static force, but as a trinity of presence. Every shadow, yours, mine, even those of the forgotten, is said to hold 3 essences. 1, the witness. It sees without judgment, but with total recall. It remembers not just what you did, but what you meant to do. It is the keeper of your true intent, which is why liars sometimes feel watched in empty rooms. 2, the warden. It protects you from the veil, barriers between worlds that you're waking. Mind cannot survive crossing. In sleep, trauma, or near death, Avek'Tul guards the gate of return. Without this anchor, many never awaken whole. 3, the wound. To deny your shadow is to wound yourself. To fear it is to blind yourself. Avek'Tul grows sick when ignored, and its sickness seeps into you. You may not see the wound, but your relationships will. Your dreams will. Your mirror will. Not all shadows are equal. Some are born with a weak Avek'Tul. Fragile, quiet, barely tethered. These people feel disconnected, forgetful, often unable to explain why they're afraid of silence. Others are born with a fierce shadow. These are the ones who speak to things in their sleep, who see others' truths without being told, who feel watched even in pitch dark. The doctrine teaches that neither is cursed, but only one walks the path toward knowing. Why the world forgot. There was a time when every temple had a shadow chamber, a sealed place with no light, no echo, where initiates met their Avek'Tul. But when the world began worshipping only what was seen, the unseen was deemed primitive. or dangerous. The light grew arrogant, and with it mankind's forgetfulness became doctrine. Yet even in our forgetting, the shadow waits. It does not age. It does not sleep. It merely follows, recording, waiting, and remembering what you once promised it. Whispers from the doctrine. He who dies with a silent shadow will return as a scream. The mirror cannot lie, but it can forget to reflect. Your sins do not haunt you. Your shadow does. The interactions inviting what follows. You do not summon the shadow. You allow it to remember that you are listening again. Inscription from the Vault of Quiet Steps. It is a mistake to think you are the master in this relationship. The shadow is not a pet. It is not a demon. It is not a force to be commanded like fire or wind. It is a being, once closer to you than blood, before you abandoned it to daylight and distraction. Yet even in neglect, Avek'Tul does not retaliate. It waits, and in waiting it learns. It hardens. It becomes strange. But there are ways, ancient, tested ways, to reopen the bond. To not just acknowledge the shadow, but interact with it. You do not call it by name. You invite it by posture, by environment, by intention so raw it almost bleeds. Here are the 4 rites of interaction, 4 doors you can choose to unlock. 1. The Mirror of Dusk. This is the gentlest call. At twilight, when neither day nor night owns the sky, sit before a mirror. Not glass, obsidian, or water, still and black. Behind you, place a single flickering flame. You must be between light and surface. Do not look at your face. Look at the edge of your reflection, the border where your image begins to blur. Then whisper aloud, "Show me what I forgot to carry." Do not speak again. Do not blink. If your reflection shifts, even subtly, you are no longer alone. 2. The Shadow Walk. In total solitude, barefoot on bare earth, walk beneath a moonless sky. Let the stars bear witness. With each step, speak aloud a truth you have never admitted, not even to yourself. Do not repeat. Do not explain. When your body begins to feel distant, when your limbs move but your breath lingers, your shadow is walking beside you. You may feel fear. This is its test. If you speak then, it listens. If you fall silent, it speaks, but not with words. 3. The Salt Circle Rite. A binding call for those ready to confront. At midnight, draw a perfect circle of black salt. Sit within it. Cover your face with a black cloth. Let your heart race. Then speak your greatest regret. Follow it with the words, "I name what I fear most in my shadow." Speak that name, not a person, but an image. The shape of the shadow when it horrifies you most. If the air shifts, if the room grows colder, you have been acknowledged. Whether it stays depends on whether you listen. 4. The Offering of Echoes. This rite is for the wounded. Take parchment and ash. Write what you never told anyone, not to free yourself, but to feed the thing that carried your silence for so long. Burn it. Let the smoke touch your skin. Then sleep. If you dream of yourself, but you are watching from behind your own eyes, your shadow is answered, and it remembers. Warnings to the unwise. Do not perform more than one rite in the same night. The shadow must choose how to respond. Never record these rituals with machines. Avek'Tul resents surveillance. Never lie during a rite, even in metaphor. The shadow only responds to truth. These rituals are not games. They are ancient doors. And once opened, the presence behind them does not always step backward. The rites are not for power, but for reunion. If you come seeking to manipulate, to extract, to weaponize, the shadow will mirror your hunger. But if you come as one who lost a friend in the light and wishes to remember, then you will hear it. Not a voice, not a word, but a feeling that you are not the only one remembering anymore. The dangers of forgetting the shadow. Those who cast no shadow are either saints or liars. Saying among the dust seers of Marakan, there is no punishment for forgetting your shadow, but there is a price, not imposed, not ordained, but inevitable. To forget the shadow is to unmoor your soul, to sever yourself from the being that was meant to walk with you from birth to burial. And when this bond weakens, things begin to happen. At first, they are subtle. They feel like coincidence, personality, bad luck, a rough season. But in the doctrine of Avek'Tul, they are signs, symptoms of abandonment. The first warnings. You begin to experience a feeling of being watched, especially when alone. Dreams where you observe yourself, helpless or frozen. A disconnection from your own memory, recalling events with emotion, but no context. A fear of silence that grows sharper with time. Animals that once trusted you refusing to approach. Mirrors that make you uncomfortable, even when nothing seems wrong. These are not punishments. They are echoes of a relationship torn by neglect. The Avek'Tul has stopped walking beside you and now walks slightly behind. The hollowed ones, Anika. In the oldest scrolls, these are called the Aneka, the hollowed. They are those whose shadows have gone cold. Not physically, those around them still see it cast, but spiritually they have become unreflected. Their shadow no longer walks in step, no longer whispers when they lie, no longer protects them in dream. Aneka often report a profound sense of emptiness even in joy, a magnetic draw to self-sabotage, not from malice, but from a deep urge to collapse inward. Increased coincidence of loss, betrayal, and misdirection. Sudden emotional numbness, as if they are spectators of their own lives. Most will never know the cause, but a few feel it, the absence of a presence that once tethered them to something deeper. And in rare cases, if the shadow is severed with force, through trauma, deceit, or forbidden rites, the shadow may become feral, the ferality of the forgotten. When Avek'Tul is wounded by neglect, it may fracture. In fragments, it becomes something else. A haunting, echoes of yourself, misaligned, attached to spaces. A reflection that moves a split second behind you. A coldness that touches your back in sacred places. In some stories, the forgotten shadow seeks out others. It attaches to those with open wounds. These people feel strange obsessions, sudden insight into your past, or inexplicable guilt. This is called echo leeching, a phenomenon rarely reversed without rite or sacrifice. How the world masks it. In the modern world, forgetting your shadow is easy. Everything is curated, performed, lit by false suns. We learn to abandon silence. We learn to fear solitude. We are trained to confuse projection for presence. And so most will never hear Avek'Tul weep. But those who do, those who sense that some part of them is still watching, still waiting, still recording, they are the ones this doctrine reaches. Not to shame, but to remind. You may forget your shadow, but it will never forget you. The shadow as key, vision, protection, and forbidden knowledge. The light shows what is. The shadow shows what is hidden. What you do with either becomes your path. Passage from the scroll of bone glass. To fear the shadow is to walk with a blade in your back. To ignore it is to break the blade and bury it in your own chest. But to befriend it, to invite it as companion, protector, and key. That is a path few dare walk, but those who do speak of strange gifts. Not powers, tools, not miracles, mechanisms. The Avek'Tul, once acknowledged, becomes not just a witness or wound, it becomes a conduit. A bridge between waking and veiled realms. A mirror that shows more than surface. A presence that leans forward when danger draws near. But be warned, these gifts come not from conquest, but from relationship. You do not take them. You are offered them, often in whispers, symbols, and dreams that stain the edges of sleep. Here are the known forms of shadow-gifted function. 1. Second sight, the veiled vision. When bonded with your shadow, your perception changes. You begin to notice what someone's eyes are saying when their mouth lies. When a place remembers pain, even if it's been painted over. Which objects or beings carry echoes that don't belong to them. The Avek'Tul does not see like flesh. It sees intent, residue, and reverberation. This gift grows stronger in darkness, silence, and grief. That is where truth trembles loudest. 2. The cloak. protection against forces that pull. In moments of vulnerability, sleep, trauma, ritual, the Avek'Tul becomes your shield. It can absorb malevolent attention, misdirecting it like a spiritual decoy. Blur your presence to entities that prey on unanchored souls. Mirror back a version of yourself that confuses your enemies, spiritual or human. This is not invincibility. It is camouflage born of companionship. Those who master this find themselves walking unnoticed in places where others tremble, be the mirror that sees back forbidden knowledge. There are rituals, rites, dangerous ones, practices that ask your Avek'Tul to step forward, not just to follow you, but to lead you into knowledge veiled by reality's veil. These are not for the curious. They are for the committed. Here are 3 such rites. A shadow scrying. Purpose: to see truth not given freely. Burn grave dirt with black myrrh and crushed mirror shards. Use a polished black surface, obsidian, water, or metal. Gaze not at your reflection, but into the movement behind it. Speak the name of one whose truth you seek. If the smoke moves left, they lie. If it coils upward, they hide pain. If it turns black, you have seen too much. Close the rite. B. Veil walking. Purpose: to witness echoes beyond your life. Enter trance. Body must touch earth, air, and stone. Envision your Avek'Tul rising from your feet, walking backward through time. Follow it into memory, not your own but another's. The vision may show lifetimes, deaths, or things that never happened but should have. Return before the shadow stops and looks back. If it does, you may not be the one who wakes. C. Binding by reflection. Purpose: to protect or control through symbolic capture. Place a consecrated mirror in a room frequented by your target. Whisper their name and an intention. Their shadow will begin to follow them out of sync, a half step delayed. They will feel discomfort, unease, even sickness. This is a dangerous binding. It frays both ends. You may gain control, but if their shadow escapes, it will come for yours. A warning writ in flame. All gifts from the shadow come at the cost of truth. Not coins, not sacrifice, but honesty so raw it bleeds. The shadow cannot be deceived. If you ask it for something while lying to yourself, it may still answer, but not as you hoped. There are no shortcuts. There are no safe paths. Only the bond, and the choice to hold the mirror when it begins to burn. You think you're afraid of the dark. Your shadow is afraid of what you've hidden in it. The final veil. What becomes of the shadow after death? When the breath leaves, the flame rises, but the shadow remains behind. To remember, to weep, or to wander. Inscription above the black gate of An-Muir. Death is not the end, not according to Avek'Tul. Death is a separation, a splitting of what was once entangled. And in this doctrine, death is not a moment. It is a process, and the most delicate of that process is not the departure of the soul, but the decision of the shadow, because Avek'Tul does not die. It was never made of life to begin with. The 3 paths of the shadow after death. In ancient texts, especially those buried beneath the silt crypts of Ur-Dael, it is said the shadow takes one of 3 paths once the body dies and the spirit unbinds. 1. The threaded return, the shadow as guide. This is the sacred path, the one sung about in veiled temples and buried beneath funerary masks. If one lived in harmony with their Avek'Tul, if they acknowledged it, listened, walked with it, then upon death, the shadow does not remain behind. It follows the soul. It threads itself into the fabric of memory and energy, anchoring identity between realms. Such souls are said to reincarnate with fragments intact. Intuition, déjà vu, unexplained knowledge, unearned wisdom. This is the origin of the old soul. Their shadow walked with them into the next dream. 2. The wandering echo, the shadow untethered. This is the most common and most tragic path. If a person ignored, repressed, or feared their shadow in life, then Avek'Tul does not follow them. Instead, it lingers. Where? In homes, on stairs, beneath mirrors. Inside the last room they knew. These shadows become echoes, fragments with no form but full memory. They cannot move forward. They can only repeat, distort, haunt. They feed on memory, on attention, on resonance. Some call them ghosts. Others call them regrets that learned how to wear shape. They are not evil. They are forgotten reflections, looking for a door back into meaning. 3. The shadow ascendant, the forbidden path, where, feared, hushed, there are whispers only ever half recorded that a few learn to bind their Avek'Tul so tightly in life, to feed it so much truth, sacrifice, and power, that it gained independence. And when they died, the body collapsed, the soul ascended or dissolved. But the shadow remained aware, not as a memory, as a being. These are the myths of possessed children who speak ancient languages, strangers with no past but uncanny familiarity, men who cast shadows that move first. The Veil Keepers called them Shadim, the twice-born. Others called them mirror walkers. In doctrine, they are never condemned, but they are feared, because if your shadow no longer needs you, who do you become? The rites of dying whole, to ensure your Avek'Tul follows you into death. 3 final acts must be performed in life. 1. The naming. Speak to your shadow aloud. Name it, not with a title, but with truth. A moment of pure admission, something only it would recognize. 2. The offering. Share one secret only it knows. Make it known. Let it no longer carry it alone. 3. The unbinding. In your final hours, say, you may follow or you may remain, but we leave as one. These are not spells. They are remembrances. The Avek'Tul does not require ritual. It requires honor. If you die without a shadow, there is a final state, worse than the wandering echo. If one dies while utterly severed from their shadow, through cruelty, denial, spiritual fracture, or ritualistic abandonment, they do not reincarnate. They do not echo. They disperse. The ancient term is Sulamek, those who faded without reflection. They are not judged. They are not punished. They are simply forgotten. Your soul may pass through the veil, but it is your shadow that carries your name. Now we enter the mythic heart, the parable encoded in whispers and ash, the tale of Neratal, the first to speak with his shadow, and the last to be ruled by it. The myth of Neratal, the shadow that learned to speak. He was born with a name already whispered, and when he cried, it was not his voice that answered. Oral fragment from the ash tongues of Lear, the birth beneath the eclipse. They say Neratal was born under a broken sun, an eclipse so long the crops bowed, the rivers paused, and the animals would not make sound. His mother bled for 3 days. His father died in his sleep before he could name him. And yet when the child arrived, he did not cry. He only blinked once, and the shadow he cast moved first. The midwives burned their hands on his skin, not from heat, but from something wrong in the air. The elder priest of the veil came that night and carved a symbol above the door, a spiral within a spiral. Do not speak his name at dusk, he said, or his shadow will answer before he does. The mirror that remembered. At 7, Neratal stopped speaking altogether. He would only communicate in mirrors. He would sit for hours before still water, not blinking, not moving, lips parted in trance. His mother reported finding words etched into frost, mirrors fogged from the inside. The elders feared possession, but the seer of Iron Ash said, no demon dwells within him. He has simply made his Avek'Tul a brother. No one believed her, until he began answering questions he was never asked aloud, until he began speaking in his sleep with a voice that was not his own, but remembered things no child could have lived through. The trial of the forgotten reflection. At 15, they locked him in the mirror vault beneath the Temple of Last Names. There, 12 mirrors reflected his image in a circle, none of them touched by light. He was left alone. No food, no warmth, only silence. This was the trial of the forgotten. Reflection used to test those suspected of being shadow split. Most wept. Some screamed. One had gouged out her own eyes to escape her reflection. Neratal simply sat. After 3 days, the mirrors no longer showed his face. They showed his shadow sitting before him, eye to eye, and then he disappeared from all 12. When they opened the vault, he stood calmly, but none of the mirrors reflected him again. Only his shadow, the devouring of the flesh host. At 20, Neratal vanished. No death, no ritual, no fire, no feast. Only an eclipse, the second of his life, and the sudden silence of all birds in the region. 3 days later, a stranger arrived in a village 44 leagues away. He bore Neratal's face, his voice, but his shadow came before him, entered rooms before he did, watched people even when he slept. The stranger knew every secret of those he met. He spoke to mirrors that were covered. He left no footprints in ash, but his shadow did. Some say this was Neratal. Others say this was the shadow wearing its maker. He was last seen in a monastery of bone and glass, whispering to a child who would not stop screaming. The monastery burned. The child never spoke again, but her shadow learned to write, the moral buried in ash. To walk with your shadow is to walk whole. To be ruled by your shadow is to walk twice. Neratal was not a villain, nor was he a prophet. He was a mirror left too long in the dark. The myth is not a warning against Avek'Tul. It is a warning against starving it until it learns to feed on you. Here is the final passage, delivered not as a conclusion, but as a closing door. You may step through or turn away. To those who cast no shadow, there are those who read these pages with interest. There are those who read them with fear. And there are a few, just a few, who read them with a quiet sense of recognition. To those few, this is not revelation, it is remembrance, because somewhere in your life you already knew. You knew something followed you that was not evil, but not tame. You knew your reflection lingered too long after you turned away. You knew your most honest moments happened when no one else was watching. And still, you forgot. It's not your fault. This world is loud. It teaches light as salvation and silence as punishment. It teaches distraction as life and solitude as sickness. But your Avek'Tul never forgot. It waited. It watched. And now you've remembered it, even for a moment. Even now, as your eyes move from line to line, something within you is not reading. It is listening. If you still cast a shadow, you still have time. Speak to it. Walk with it. Feed it truth. Let it follow you into death as a companion, not a witness. And if you cannot love it yet, at least do not lie to it. The next time you stand in sunlight, do not look at what you see. Look at what sees you. The breath that follows. The echo that lives. Avek'Tul.